we'll try to catch up, I hope. So, good morning. My name's Ken Crumrick, and the webinar today is a strategic approach to succession planning. My background is that I have a background in engineering and business, and had an opportunity to work in a lot of functions and to plan successions for either myself or for others in the organization. I'm going to draw on that experience, my mistakes and my successes as we go through this topic. I'm also a member of the Canton chapter of SCORE. So I'm going to start with a little bit about SCORE before we get into the topic. So SCORE is a nationwide organization. It consists of chapters that are located throughout the United States. It's been in existence for a very long time. And our purpose is to bring a knowledge to bear through volunteers and help small businesses, large businesses, but our primary focus is small businesses, from soup to nuts, how to get into business, how to get out of business, and everything in between. The way we work is on a confidential, free basis as mentors. If you have a need, you can contact us using this information, and you'll reach the Canton chapter that has 40 volunteers. You'll be assigned a mentor who will get things started, but then we'll mentor you on your particular need in the form of either an email mentoring, phone mentoring, or via Zoom or in person. And the mentor that you're assigned will draw on the resources of the 40 volunteers we have locally in the Canton chapter, but also nationwide resources. And you can contact us using this information. Now we're going to get into this presentation and a couple of logistic items. The first is that I will be asking you some questions and hopefully get your response here. And I'd prefer if you would use the chat function to respond to my questions. If you have another question that is independent of the question I've asked you, if you could use the Q&A feature, that would work better for us. Also, you'll be sent a copy of this presentation, and it's being recorded as well. You'll be sent a recording. So let's get into it. So what I hope that you get out of this webinar, it starts with a set of learning goals. What it is I want you to learn from this webinar. Second of all, I'm going to cover why it's important to know to have those goals and to understand this topic. I'll cover some background, some common mistakes that I've, as I said, made and hopefully corrected on several occasions. But then I'm going to tee up a case history with some situation facts that I'll use to illustrate the 5 steps of a process that I recommend that you use to avoid the common mistakes. And then we'll wrap things up. So ask some questions. I'll ask you some questions, and let's have a good dialogue on the topic. So let's get started with learning goals. Now, this presentation, let me say before I get into this slide in particular, this presentation assumes that you know something about the position you're trying to fill, particularly its metrics. What are the measures of performance that an individual in this position you're trying to fill is attempting to achieve? I'm also assuming that this position inside of a bigger company is subject to a flow down of the goals of the particular company. So if you don't know the position well and you don't know the goals of the company, I suggest that you start there first before we get into this presentation. Whether you're a for-profit, a nonprofit, a government agency, whether you're a small business, it doesn't matter. Write down the position metrics, write down the goals for the company. If you're a small business and you're thinking of succession planning as a part of your overall exit strategy, well, then you have some additional things that you might want to be considering. And I would be glad to handle that with you directly as an individual mentor. In fact, if any of you are working on succession planning, that goes as well. After this, we can have individual mentoring sessions to help you with your particular succession plan. So your learning goals today, though, are that succession planning is strategic in nature. And I'm going to cover that in a little more detail in a moment. Your second goal out of this session is that you need to be planning. You need to get ahead of this. The third is you need to be deliberate about the steps that you take in succession planning. It avoids the common mistakes, but just as importantly, it builds a business case or a case for you to justify why it is you've chosen the individual that you have for this particular position. So I think my first question is just that. Why am I saying that succession planning is strategic? Think about this for a second, respond via chat, and let's see if we can't get some things going. Why is succession planning strategic? That's the question. Give you a couple of seconds here before I give you my view on why that is the case. Okay, we got a couple of messages flowing in. Okay, so Bobby mentioned that it positions the organization for the future. Absolutely. You're talking about filling a position that impacts the future of the company. That is so true. It brings about stability for the organization. Well done. That's a great answer as well. So you're right on target with these answers. It's a long-term decision that you're making, hopefully. You're hiring the person, you want them to stay in the company because you're going to train them and you're going to put a lot of investment in them. You want them to stay as a part of the company long-term. You want to align them with the company's goals, and it provides for promotion as well. So, okay, let's go on to a little bit of background on succession planning. So a little bit of background. I looked this up. The annual turnover rate from all causes across all industries was 46% last year. Most companies target a fraction of that. Now, turnover rate is from all causes. It's from retiring, from discharging through, company restructuring and so forth. It's firings and it's quittings. But 2/3 of this 40% are voluntary voluntary leavings from the company. 2/3 deal in retirements and quitting. People that are making voluntary decisions to leave your company. That's a really high rate. So this is a broad issue that covers every company. Some industries are have higher turnover rate than others. Some are very low, but that's the average. So what are some of the common mistakes for why successions are unsuccessful? The first I found and actually did was lack of knowledge, poor understanding of the position and how it relates to the business unit it's in and higher level company goals. Said in a nutshell, how does the position itself add value to the company? That's the number one mistake I've seen. The number two mistake is lack of objectivity. Everybody's got their favorite. oh, so-and-so's in line for such and such a person's position. Well, that's in line with how things were, not necessarily how things will be. And there's favorites that come into play. So there's a lack of objectively looking at the position relative to the person's skill set. And then there's poor planning. And all that list just leads to a skill mismatch. And you end up with poor performance, and you end up with having to do it all over again. So you've lost an opportunity. You've had financial impacts in the organization, whether it's from a budgeting perspective or from a profitability perspective or from a purpose perspective. It's a major lost opportunity if you don't put the effort into it up front. And if you don't spend the time learning about the position in the company, and you're not objective about it. So hopefully the process I go through is going to force some of these common mistakes into the background. So before we get into the process steps, let's tee up this case history that I'm going to use to illustrate each of the process steps. So the case history is that this position is a manufacturing director that I was doing a succession planning for. It was inside of a company, a small company inside of a bigger company, and we were pretty autonomous. So we acted like a small company. We had products that were ours, proprietary on one hand, but then commodity products, which were dog eat dog, and we really had to be competitive. Our services as a part of our offering were design work, manufacturing work, and then going onto the customer site and installing it. We were in industrial markets, and our geography was primarily North America. The situation for the company is that it was a turnaround status. We had done major restructuring, so got the patient off the critical list, but we had gone forward and introduced some new products and had our first international project completed. Financially, we were at break even. So we were really looking to go to the next step. We had a new strategy. We were going to grow the company from this basis profitably with new products and new international customers, and thought we could double the sales of the company if we did that. We also had a culture to try to promote from within, if it's possible. It wasn't possible for me as a leader of this company to do that. So I had to hire from the outside, but we were going to hire people that had the potential to grow. So that was some of the background. As I mentioned, the position was the manufacturing director, reported to me. The metrics for this position, as it was, were quality, delivery, cost control, and effective people management. The position situation was that the manufacturing leader that was in the job was great on quality and had strong technical skills. And that was good. But the delivery performance of manufacturing was poor. And the leader demonstrated pretty poor people management in that he had tough time making staffing decisions that needed to be made, didn't delegate well, and had real problems understanding cost control and versus what we estimated the product would take to manufacture. Our timing was we wanted to fill the position in 3 months. And beyond that, I knew that I'd probably be moving on in 2 years or so. So I wanted to take the opportunity to hire somebody that could possibly move into the leadership position for the company. So this was we had a big bill to fill here. And I'm using this example because it illustrates all aspects of the process that I'm going to talk about now. As a side note, we were going to keep the existing manufacturing leader, but move him to where his strengths were in quality and technical skills. But it made the bar higher because this was a net add to the company. We had to justify doing this at the total salary that the individual was having to be paid. That was an additional expense the company was going to have to absorb. So let's get into the process. So the first step of this process I'm recommending is that you establish what are your goals for this particular succession, narrowly focused on, if I have a success in this succession, how am I going to measure that? What are my goals that I'm going to strive for? Your second step is to take a hard look at what is the current position as is, unchanged. What is this position producing today in terms of value? That value can be positive or it could be negative. The next step is say, okay, given that the goals I've got are good goals, how might this position value improve if I hit those goals? What's that look like? And then the next step is very key. That's choosing the best selection criteria that you need for this position. Now, I'm going to be talking about what that criteria is in steps 1, 2, and 3. So it kind of leads up. And then the fifth step is implementing it. And I'm going to spend less time on that because usually that's the mechanics of how it is you go out and post the job and bring in candidates and interview and so forth. I'm going to spend less time on step number 5. So let's get into this whole goal setting step 1. So I'm going to challenge you to look at this from 3 different perspectives. The first is a pretty narrow view just for the position that's being filled. You have a goal relative to this position, and if you just stop there and just looked at the position, what do you want? Well, you have to ask yourself, what's the current status? What are the metrics of the position? How well are they being met? You'll notice when I teed up the case history, or the case that we're going to be talking about, I talked a little bit about what the current situation was with the existing manufacturing director. That's your current status. What's your goal? Well, it comes as it's somewhat of a no-brainer, and it's straightforward that whoever's going to fill that position, you want the performance to be improved. But you also have some timing issues that are around when it is that you want that to be done. Now, frequently people just stop here. They're looking for a warm body to slot into a position that was described 5 years ago, and they're going to dust it off, clean it up, and they're just going to stop here. Don't have to consider anything else. Find a body as quick as you can to drop in because we're experiencing some pain because we don't have the position there, or the individual there, or they're performing poorly and we need to fix it quickly. Don't stop there. Go to the next perspective. Look at the business unit where the position resides. The first thing you've got to ask yourself is, what's this business trying to achieve? What's this business unit's vision? What are their goals? What are their tactics? What are your financial targets? And so forth. If you're a small business owner, think about what your legacy is going to be after you leave. What do you want that business to be? If you want it to continue profitably, which is a good idea, otherwise you'll end up just taking it back. That's great. Write that down. What is that goal that you want for the business with your successor? Okay, second question. How has the strategy changed? What's the if there's a new direction going on, people are always updating these things. Your position statement might be 5 years old, but guess what? Last year, new direction. So think about how this new direction impacts your position and then write your goal. What do you want this successor to do to achieve that is above and beyond the current position's goal that you've got up here at the top? What do you want this position to achieve relative to this business unit? The last perspective I want you to think about is that if you're a part of a bigger corporation, there's frequently, corporate, pass downs. As you consider hires, I want you to consider this initiative or that initiative. That imposes something on this succession process that you need to write down. So you've got goals coming from three directions. So let's see how that worked for our case. For the position being filled, the individual in there is underperforming. We talked about that. So within 3 months, which was my timing, I wanted to hire an individual that could improve delivery, people management, cost control, but don't sacrifice the good things, the quality that the current manager was achieving. You don't want to give up the good stuff. You want better. So those were the goals I had for the position. From a company perspective, what is the goal? So here's the second question I've got for you. How did the business strategy change? Take a few minutes and send me your answer in the chat window, and we'll kick this one around a little bit. So do you remember how the strategy changed? Okay. So we don't have many answers coming in. So I'll just move ahead. So if you recall from the teeing up of the business of the case history that we're going through here, the strategy was the growth strategy was the new strategy for the company. We had introduced a new product, had a few initial sales. We had just done our first international project. So we needed an individual in this manufacturing role that could, number one, think strategically, but number two, really grab a hold of this growth strategy and support it. Any of you that have been in manufacturing, typically manufacturing doesn't like change. You throw something new into the mix, it doesn't get handled well. So what we wanted was somebody that could handle critical thinking and contribute to how it is we can meet this growth strategy, but they needed to be innovative because there were going to be new products and new customer demands, international customers who did business very differently from the domestic customers. So I needed somebody who was good thinking skills, but I needed somebody who was innovative, who could adapt to change. What were what was the cultural goal? Well, we needed to hire somebody who could take over for me in a couple years. So those were our goals from three perspectives. The position, pretty straightforward. The business put added baggage on us relative to this succession plan. And thirdly, we had this extraneous thing that was going to come several years down the line that we needed to try to make an impact on as we filled this position. That was step one. But to hire these extra skill sets, we recognized right out of the chute was going to cost us. So we better have a pretty good case to justify it. So let's go to the second step, which was assessing the base value. If you recall, this was all about looking at how the position is working right now. What's the current value that is being created or destroyed by the individual in the position? So it's relative to unchanged metrics. Good metrics performance equals positive value. Poor metrics equals negative value. But I'm going to ask every one of you to take a shot at estimating what that means in terms of economics. You know, if you're not in a for-profit business, it's just about what's the impact on my budget? What's the impact on my purpose? Come up with a way of really characterizing what this looks like. And while you're looking at this, you have a unique opportunity to really ask yourself, what's the skill set required to overcome some of these negatives or accentuate the positives of the current value that you see? Do you need higher emphasis on certain skills? So every step of the way, you're trying to think about the skill sets, because remember, at the end of the day, you have to write a position description that says, I want people that are like this. You have to interview them to see if they really have that skill set before you make your final choice. So get your thinking started right out of the chute. Okay, let's look at our case. How well was the existing manufacturing director meeting the position matrix? What was the positive value? What's the negative value? So what I did was I sat down and I really thought about what it meant to have our current situation in terms of, in our case, a for-profit business. What was the financial impact? So the positive value was good, good quality, low product scrap rate. That was built into the fact that we were able to get to break even economics at the point in time that we were trying to fill this position. That's good. I don't want to sacrifice that, but it was built into the financials. So I spent a little more time looking at what the impact of the negative was. So good quality, good low scrap rate. We stayed on customers' bid list, and we had low waste. Okay, so I spent time looking at the negative side here. Okay, from a delivery point of view, our customers ranked this high, particularly for the commodity products where we had a lot of competition. And we lost 5% of our sales on those products. And they accounted for, gosh, over half of our financials. So this was a big impact. It hurt us to have this kind of manufacturing performance. Now we'll put some numbers to this and actual numbers to this a little later. Cost control. By not meeting our estimated costs by 15%, we had a huge impact on our gross margin, 10%. These were big numbers. And it was pretty clear. If we had cost control, we would have this kind of profitability. We would have been so much further ahead. And it was these kind of issues that really led me to consider, I need to do succession planning for the existing manufacturing director, find someone, move him over, and move this new individual in. That was my thinking at the time. So now let's look at step 3. You kind of have some sense of the base situation that was going on. So now let's look at what the enhanced value could be. So in our case, we were looking at an existing organizational structure, but you can also do succession planning within a restructured organization. So from an existing organizational point of view, you need to come up with what's the added value you get from hiring a successor who can keep the good results and eliminate the bad. You have to come at it from the standpoint of What's the added value if I align this successor with revised customer business goals and company goals? What's that worth to me? In a restructured organization, clean slate. You typically have expanded roles, you have positions that are combined, you have you potentially have a new set of metrics. But people don't restructure an organization if they don't have have that converted into a set of desired outcomes. You restructure an organization, there's usually a financial or some sort of purpose related potential that you're trying to capture. And when you sit down and people have put blocks on the org chart to fill, they've said, this individual is going to yield that potential that I'm trying to get when I restructure a company. So you've usually got new metrics that need to be satisfied. And you can calculate what that particular job is going to contribute relative to that potential. It's going to be an estimate, but go to the trouble of trying to think about how you would do that. Your next part of step 3 is you may very likely have a new skill set that you are trying to achieve. So take time to write down those skills that you're looking for. Write them in the language that you might use when you write up your position statement in step 4. Then do the valuation. What's that look like? Try to be objective about it with numbers. If you can't, try to be precise about it subjectively. Then sometimes there's an offset. You got to spend more money for this individual. Well, if you do, you've got to have a pretty good case to do it. Because on the economic value side of it, it's a little bit uncertain. On the salary side, that's money you're going to pay out daily, monthly, whatever the pay cycle is. So you got to have this valuation done. How do you do it? Well, let's take a little bit of a look at how that played out in our case. So for starters, the organizational structure was unchanged. The base value that we were trying to get from a good performance was the increased value of on-time performance and cost control. The additional value we wanted at a higher level was we wanted somebody that could really contribute to the new products, new customers, new geography strategy that we had, and we wanted to replace the president. What were the skills we were looking for? So let me ask you, before I go on and show you any of the numbers we did around this, I'm going to stop you all here and ask you a question. So you're looking for somebody who can do on time well, who can do cost control well, who can see that new products are the future of the company, new customers and new geographies, and might want to be in a position to be the president. Ask yourself right now, what skills do we need to enhance this and achieve this value? Take a few minutes, send me some thoughts on chat. If you want somebody with on-time performance, what's that mean? What do you mean? What are you looking for from the individual? What skill or capability is really good to have when you're trying to achieve on-time performance, same for cost control and so forth? I'll wait a few minutes here for people to respond. Okay, so be organized and have good communication skills. No question, um, we talked about good people management. Both of those skill sets are important. Anybody else want to take a shot? All right, discipline, dependability, a good motivator. Okay, that checks boxes too. So we each come at this from different directions. Let me show you what we did here, and here's what I'll do. I'll summarize the skills I came up with, or we as a hiring team came up with, um, in just a minute. But I wanted to do the math first. So let's kind of look at that. Okay, valuation. In the base case, we said we were losing 5% of sales, and we needed to increase the gross margin by 3% overall. What did that mean? That meant $900,000 a year. That's a big number if we could achieve it. What was the probability of doing it? Well, we felt pretty good. But we needed to get that delivery up, and we needed to get our cost in control. And so that was a big nut for us. It really meant a lot to the company. And when you're break even financially, it meant a huge amount. Then we had growth strategy was projected to double over the 5 to 10 years. We said this manufacturing director was one of the 3 key contributors to achieving this. And we felt manufacturing had a disproportionate impact on the success. To the extent that this individual could lead the organization to be receptive to the new products coming along, be receptive to the new customer demands. I mean, international customers were notorious for wanting things done a very different way than our domestic customers were. We had to be ready to be able to do that. And this individual had to use some of the skills that were mentioned on the chat to drive the message through the organization. Presidential potential? Well, at this stage, we threw a number at it and said, look, we don't have to recruit somebody in the future here. We'll save some recruitment expense. And we'll also, of course, save the training expense of a new leader coming on board, because the manufacturing director would kind of know what was going on in the company. So there was good upside potential here. But we were going to have to pay 20% above the market salary range to get a high potential individual. At that time, back then, the base salary was 170,000 with that 20% potential. On top of that, there was bonus potential that would add maybe 50% to that number. And if you recall, this was a new add to the organization and its financials. We were keeping the other individual in a quality and technical role. This individual was a new add. So our business case had to be able to support this additional cost. So this is a rhetorical question. Was it a good business case? You bet it was. In the base, you had 900,000 to work with. In the potential for doubling revenue, a huge number. And so this was a pretty good business case. Now, as I said, I use this case because it illustrated all the steps of the process. Is that going to happen for you every time? No. You're going to end up with a lower justification. You're going to end up with more subjective than financial measures of your justification. But if you go through this process and do these steps, what you'll be in the position to do is to justify whoever it is you want to hire and what skill sets they need, because you've tied it back to what the position needs, what the business unit needs, and what the overall company needs. So now we're at really defining the selection criteria for the individual. So generally, you want to go after what are the skills and experience I need from the 3 goal perspectives that we talked about. You want to try to prioritize them because no candidate is going to have them all, right? Some will be better at this and better at that. So if you've done a little bit of prioritization of these skills, you'll be ahead of the game when you go to select the final candidates. And then, of course, what's the salary range for this position? All those are things you need to have prior to launching this out and posting the position. For our case, here's what we came up with as a hiring team. The skills I needed were some basic manufacturing skills. I had to have some experience in manufacturing and the whole give and take of logistics and scheduling and that sort of stuff. I wanted that in the base. No argument there. From a priority point of view, I needed somebody with a sense of urgency, somebody who could actually take that sense of urgency, get it through the organization, look for ways to improve delivery. But if you don't have a sense of urgency that, look, we promised this, we got to do that, then you're out of luck from the start. I needed somebody with good economic thinking, and that's how I characterized my requirements from a base perspective. That economic thinking would get into cost control improvement, process changes that could be made, things that could be done that would get us back in line with what we really thought the product ought to cost. From a business unit perspective, we needed somebody that could really handle change. The business was going to throw a lot at manufacturing from a standpoint of new products, customer scope, what they might want broader than our current customer base, and of course, geographical demands, which really got you back to a lot to delivery and that sort of stuff because you're shipping things overseas. From a company perspective, needed good leadership skills. If they were going to grow into a presidential role, they had to come in equipped with decisiveness, critical thinking, and be able to influence the organization in positive ways. We had a good business case to hire this skill set, and we used these skills to really map out and do step 5, which includes writing up a position description. It includes designing the interview questions that we were going to use to really probe at whether or not the individuals that we were looking at really did have the prioritized skills and experience. Because today, you put a position description out there, most candidates that apply have been coached one way or the other to adapt their resume, to pick up key search words in the position description. Those come back at you. You look at them and you go, oh, this individual's great. Look at all these connections they've got to what I want. Well, honestly, if you're applying for a job, that's what you want to do. You want to tie your resume to the position description. So your interviewing is critical in ferreting out who is just making a change to their resume and who actually have the skills that you're looking for. So step 5 draws from all the steps that you've been doing as a part of this process. And as you go along, you're collecting the skill sets. But ask yourself, if I were interviewing somebody today, as you're going through steps 1 through 4, if I were interviewing somebody today, what question would I ask them? That tees you up, gets you ready, and you have a common basis to evaluate both internal candidates and external ones. And harping back to one of the common mistakes, if you've done this process well, you can avoid the lack of objectivity of just placing somebody in the position that knows the activities of the job, but just really can't deliver, but could possibly not be able to deliver the performance you're looking for. So if you've done this, you've got a good basis for interviewing current candidates or, existing in-company candidates or ones you bring in from the outside. In fact, if you've planned ahead of time, what you could do is take a look at an internal candidate and say, okay, they got 4 of the 5, but they're missing this 5th one. We're going to get them out for some training before we put them into that new job. And you will have identified as a part of your succession planning some of the things you need the successor to have. If you're in small business, you've got some key right-hand people that are in your organization. If you're thinking ahead, saying, gosh, I really want this individual to take over the company, well, you as the owner better train them up, because they don't want to be learning on the job after they've taken over for you. Because 9 times out of 10, you'll end up with getting the company back because they didn't learn what they needed to learn before you went through the transaction with them to sell the company and get you off onto a beach. So my final point here is that you're going to go through the recruiting process. You're going to post it. Screening and selection is going to be done. But one of my key bugaboos is that people are allowing the software to do the screening. My suggestion to you is don't do that. Look at a lot of the resumes that are coming in. Don't look at the final few that the software will pick for you. Back into it and look at some of the other resumes there, because you'll find some really good people. They might not be writing the most perfect resume that the software picks, but they're really capable and could really fill the role that you've got in a much more effective fashion than somebody that just tweaked their resume. So we've gone through all 5 steps now. We're attempting to avoid poor planning, poor lack of knowledge, lack of objectivity, skill mismatches. And my personal experiences is that once I started using this, my success was a whole lot better. Prior to that, didn't work out. So the mistakes that you see me representing in this presentation are ones that I've made. So succession planning, strategic, plan for it, and apply the process. Thank you. So we got a few more minutes here. Any questions? Use chat or use Q&A. You'll be sent a copy of the presentation. It actually has some notes in the notes section for each slide that add a little more color to what I'm talking about. So I would need to draw on that. If you need a SCORE mentor, contact SCORE. We'll be glad to get you going and try to help you solve the problem that you need to solve.
Okay, Ken. Hey, thank you. Thank you for the time and the information that you shared. With that, and thank you for those of you that attended. So Thanks again.
Okay,
So
thanks,
long, everybody.
everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. John, any comments?
Nice job.
Thank you.
You are very smooth at being able to do the presentation. It's awesome.
Well, you know what they say, 80% prep.
Yeah. That's
Can
true.
Can I send you guys a 5-minute an invite for a brief recap?
Sure can. I'll
Okay.
get off.
All right. I'm going to end this then.